everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules today to join us for our webinar, Why So Serious? What B2B can learn from commercial filmmaking. My name is Ellie Jones. I'll be facilitating today's webinar. Okay, so we'll begin. Ash, if you could just click onto the next slide, please. Just before we get started with this webinar, I am going to do a short shameless plug for our next webinar in the series, which is occurring next month on the 20th of June. This one will be hosted by our chairman, Fran Brosen, and our US head of strategy, Philip Black, and they'll be presenting our latest annual What Works Where research, which we have done every year since 2011. This year, we'll be focusing on the big question in B2B, which is what are marketing leaders at the world's largest companies doing to drive success? So if you'd like to register for that webinar, please register after this one at omobono.com/www.webinar. Okay, and I'd like to advise everyone that this webinar is being recorded, so if you do need to leave early for any reason, we will make sure that the recording will be shared with you after to watch at your leisure. We'd also like to welcome your questions at any time during the webinar. So there is on the screen now an image of the questions section. So please do submit to us any questions you might have. We'll do our best to answer these at the end. The questions panel is on the right-hand side, and I'll be tracking these and making sure that any questions get answered and forward over to Ash. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker today, who is Ash Ogden, our Senior Creative at Omobono London.
Hello, nice to speak to you all, and thanks for taking time out of your busy days to come and hear about B2B video and a little bit about B2C video too. So I would just like to introduce myself and a bit of my background. So I am a filmmaker who also has a background in writing and directing theatre. So a lot of experience producing, directing, writing films from a lot fairly balanced perspectives and camera work as well. I have just recently finished a short film with one of our colleagues here, senior colleagues at Omobono, Lee Wardell, which just won Best Indie Film at Brighton Film Festival here in the UK. So we're in the middle of a bit of a film promotion schedule at the moment. At Omobono, I have been working on B2B video for the last 5 years, and trying to meld the two worlds really of B2C and B2B and see how can we kind of wring the most drama out of B2C and put that into the B2B world, and just trying to marry up the two really, noticing where the pitfalls are, where the big benefits of certain tactics lie in either camp. And one of the first things that I would like to talk about today actually is whether there is such a thing as either camp. So just to start things going, a little bit of audience participation. I'd like to start with the question, do you think that B2B and B2C video should be treated differently? And you should just see a poll come through there. Okay, excellent. So all of you have voted. Thank you very much. And we're looking at a majority of no, but with some yeses. And I think this is, you know, a misleading question in some ways, in that it's whether it's worth setting up a dichotomy in the first place, right? So there are obviously some significant differences between the production environments in which B2B and B2C occur. There are obviously differences in which the two are measured in terms of their success, the kinds of audiences that they go out to. But today I'm going to be looking at this question primarily from a production perspective. And my personal feelings from that perspective are that we really shouldn't look at the two as separate, and it is a bit of a false dichotomy. Because if we start looking at the two as different creatively, we suddenly start to run into a couple of problems, and those problems are mostly around hamstringing our own expectations and setting our own expectations in a negative way. I think that one of the biggest hurdles that B2B has to overcome in terms of its approach to video is fully realizing and selling itself on the potential of conceptual video and of conceptual messaging. And this is something I'll be exploring later in the talk. what I mean by this, especially from an internal perspective, from an agency perspective, referring to the term B2B can actually kind of be a bit of an excuse for conceptual laziness. And I don't mean this in a particularly scathing way, but I mean that it comes with a certain level of familiarity. There are certain videos that are regularly produced in the B2B arena, and I'm going to be exploring that next, but there are certain templates that crop up again and again and again that companies seem to ape and copy. And I think hopefully we would all agree that what we're looking for is to produce something that is genuine and original and that makes us the ones that are copied. So I'm going to be exploring what a framework or an approach, a kind of mindset, if you will, that we should embrace to try and get there and try and get that individuality. So no further ado, I will take us through to our agenda. So I'm going to be having a little look at the B2B video landscape as it currently stands, and a little bit about how it has developed over the last 5 years or so. I'm going to be looking at examples of when B2B video works and when it doesn't work, then breaking it down and examining and analysing why certain B2B videos work that have received particular accolades. I will then be looking at some of the common pitfalls to avoid. So these will be drawn from a combination of some popular examples, but also from just my experience of where we can try and shift things a little to try and get the most production value and the most interest out of your video content. I'll also be looking at the shifting role of video itself. So what role does video play in current marketing communications, and how does it interact with other assets in your marketing ecosystem? And then finally, I will touch on the importance of trust in the filmmaking process. It's a word that's not actually bandied around a lot in the profession, but it is an incredibly important one. And so that is what is on the menu for today. So the video landscape itself, the B2B video landscape it is relatively emergent. If we're talking about the budgets generally being lower, we could say that the examples of there being famous B2B videos that are being circulated online is a relatively recent phenomenon, and you can especially see this in the number of blogs that are bringing up the best 5 B2B videos that there were this year, or the best 10 pieces of B2B content, etc. It's very much in the sort of blogosphere recently, but obviously doesn't have the long-standing heritage of TV advertising to back it up. That being said, 70% of B2B buyers will watch videos on online platforms along their path to purchase. This is just from some recent Google research, but obviously I don't think really anyone really needs to hear the fact that video is an incredibly important medium, but I think it does need to be drawn home that it's becoming an increasing part of the B2B sphere and an increasing sling to the bow in that area. So what does B2B video look like currently? I touched on earlier that there are certain templates that exist in B2B, and we have a couple of those up here. I won't be showing you the full videos, as we probably have about 10 minutes worth of content on this page alone, but just generally, the biggest camps that I have come across in my time working in B2B video are comedy. So it has become quite popular to use comedy as a way into selling a B2B service because it is surprising and it is often irreverent and energetic, and it kind of undercuts the serious, stodgy image that B2B could be said to have had. And I don't think that really exists anymore. And that is probably as part of this movement, to be honest, of embracing video in this way. What we have here is an example from Schneider Electric, in which basically it is it is an operation manager based software, software and hardware for operation managers in buildings. And this video takes a comedic look at how an operations manager who is doubting himself and doubting his significance on the organization, one day is able to turn the AC on in the building, which in turn triggers a butterfly effect, And the boss of the company, who is all sweaty and tired, is actually able to sign a document that allows internet to be introduced into Peru, which allows a Peruvian farmer to access it on his phone and to take a picture of his panpipe playing llama, which then in turn becomes a gigantic viral sensation. And hey presto, the operations manager is not just an operations manager. He has powered a viral internet sensation. There's even a sort of strange bit of meta commentary going on in that video about the potential of viral video and its effect on business. So that is a relatively smart take. We have the talking head, a staple from the very beginning. These are starting to become much more artistic with higher art direction value. And I think this is mainly just coming down to the level of camera equipment that we can get relatively cheaply now. So these videos can be produced for relatively low budget compared to a what I would call a fictional or an artificial or a set based production, because usually these will be based upon real world environments, going out, talking to, interviewing to a person who is actually there, and using as much of that natural environment and lighting and set dressing as possible, for example. So I think this has always been a staple because of its efficiency and because also of the need to put faces to names and faces to business. So this type of video plays a big role in humanizing a brand. And then, of course, we have the product demo. These usually take the form of animations. I would say that the more successful ones take the form of animations. This is really where you have a technology platform or a technology product, could also be a service. But generally, you are taking the user through introducing them to the name of the product and some of its major features. And because, of course, this is an abstract offering, it's something that you can't really show in the real world unless you were to film an iPhone screen while you were showing it. Generally, you're showing something that is abstract and intangible, so it tends to be animation depicting the benefits and features of products. So I think these are the three camps that we're looking at. And this is just a little bit of an assessment of what we have. And I think it's useful to look at just in terms of being aware of what is out there, but it is not necessarily something to look at as a template. I think this is where some of the major trends are heading, and I don't think anyone is really necessarily surprised to see any types of these video coming out of B2B brands. They're becoming a little bit a staple, as it were. So nothing wrong with them in terms of their appeal and their ability to get information across, but in terms of being innovative and pushing the envelope cinematographically and pushing the envelope in terms of messaging, they are not always hitting the mark, or at least feel audiences are beginning to come a little inundated with these types of messages. So as an example, I am now just going to share you what I would call, I'll share one example of how not to do it and one example of how to do it. I won't show you all of the first one, but I will invite some discussion afterwards.
Bonjour, welcome to the Deloitte Labs. Seems like Duncan Stewart is cooking something.
Hey Kathleen, yeah. I'm working on our Deloitte Technology, Media and Telecom predictions for 2010. Let's start off with solar power. In 2009, solar, like a lot of clean tech, had a difficult year. In 2010, we forecast more problems for the people who make solar modules. E-readers, going to have a big year, but not as big as they might. They'll sell millions, not tens of millions of devices, because they're too small and they're too black and white. Television. And our next invention.
I think the TV has already been invented.
Good point. Okay, our next prediction is the reinvention of television, putting widgets on it for the internet, but not yet, at least, having 3D. Which is why our next prediction, we need to keep it under lock. That's the tablet computer. We think tablet computers are going to be the multi-purpose device that...
Okay, so that's what we have from that first video there from Deloitte's 2010 TMT predictions. And I'm now going to play a more recent offering from GE from their series Unimpossible Missions.
There's an expression we use for an unlikely or impossible event. When something has little or no chance, we say that it has a snowball's chance in hell. But those are the kinds of odds we like. In our experiment, we're going to send a snowball to hell and try to bring it back safely. We'll be attempting this at an old foundry, where the molten metal reaches temperatures of over 2,000 degrees. We think this makes it pretty much the closest thing to hell that exists on Earth. To pull this off, we got GE scientists and engineers at the Global Research Center to collaborate and come up with a solution. They drew on technology from the power, aviation, and healthcare industries and developed a vessel made from a special superalloy. It was engineered to withstand incredibly high temperatures, so we normally use it to build jet engines, which have to endure extreme environmental stresses. But it was never designed for this. We're putting the snowball in a specially designed 3D printed holder and then placing that in our vessel. Then we lower it into a vat and completely cover it in molten metal slag. And when we pull it out, we hope our snowball will be intact.
Okay, so I'll just get my slides back on. And the first question is it a fair comparison to play those two videos back to back? I mean, it is clear that in the Deloitte example, we're using a small internal camera team. It's from 2010 and it's some future predictions. So something that they probably produce relatively cheaply internally and to sort of get the information out there, like the essential information out there to their audience. But I think there are a couple of reasons why I think they are actually a fair comparison. The first is down to this quotation here. So the fact that B2B buyers, being consumers themselves, have the same viewing habits as everyone else. Consequently, the opportunity for B2B players is fairly evident if they want to reach their prospects where they're spending their time. It is B2C video and highly cinematic video, like that second GE example, that is shaping our expectations as viewers. It is cinema that is shaping our expectations of viewers. It is advertising that we see on the TV every day. So, very much like in all arenas of industry where consumers are shaping expectations, here it is consumer video that is shaping the rest of the industry in turn. Also, and this is a very, very interesting finding, both of these videos were featured on best B2B video lists in their respective years. So there is 5 years in between their production times, but each of these was taken to be one of the best B2B videos out there in its time. Which is kind of interesting and says a lot about what is expected of B2B video now. We've come a long way from taking video as a way of say for example, filming a presenter or filming someone in the office who wants to relay information. It has been taken to a much more cinematic place, and we're starting to ask, what is it that our brand feels like? What is it that what big burning question is it that your service answers? Suddenly we're tapping into these far more deep and emotional channels in viewers. So you don't always need a budget of $300,000, like in that GE example, to pull off something like that. And that's the other kind of thing to qualify, I guess. It's not just a matter of budget. The thing that B2B is able to differentiate on that will bring it closer to B2C is conceptual thinking and a conceptual approach to video. So what do I mean by this? So in his director's commentary to the GE Snowball's Chance in Hell video, the director Diego Contreras, he spelt out that most of the time that he wins a big project, it's because he reimagined the idea in a way that felt much bigger than it was originally envisaged by the client. So for the Unimpossible Mission series, it was originally meant to be a docu-drama or docu-style project with a very small crew. He presented a treatment that was a completely different take, and that was the final product that they ended up with. So interestingly, in the middle portion of that GE Snowball's A Chance in Hell video, there is a section where it talks about our GE scientists who are working behind the scenes collaborate and innovate, and the language that's coming through there is actually far more commonplace and stereotypical, and you can almost feel it in the middle of the video that you've got this action thriller style cinematography that feels like it's something like a Sicario or a Mission Impossible style film, and then you have this slight dip into where the corporate offering is, and a little bit of that language, but it absolutely does not hamper the video in any way. It elevates it completely. And so if you could imagine that middle section when the scientists are in the lab and they're devising this video could have been shot in a way almost more similar to the forward Deloitte example, or just in terms of watching materials scientists sitting in a lab and talking about why this new material that they have is the best thing out there and enumerating the reasons. It could be that you have a short animation about this new breakthrough material that can withstand heat. But instead, what the video did was take a saying that has a certain level of expectation, the Snowball's Chance in Hell. It flips and subverts that saying. But more importantly, aside from filming it in a highly cinematic way with all of this sound design and cinematography, it also reduces GE's positioning statement and what the video wants to say as a statement to pretty much one line. We are able to achieve the impossible. Or it could be, we are able to redefine the lines of what's possible, to redraw the lines of what's possible. But essentially, that video smacks of them distilling it down to one sentence and saying, well, this is what this video is going to be about. And there is amazing conceptual clarity to it from which everything else comes. It's from where all of the other artistic decisions in that video comes to. But I don't think the video would represent what it does if it hadn't been pinned down to such a tight conceptual bearing. So what I really mean when I talk about the difference between these two videos is I think it pretty much comes down to the difference between video and cinema, and that this also might be the difference in terms of the expectation upon B2B brands now in the video that they're producing. You can take a video camera, you can take it to a lab, you can take it to the office, you can take it out and about with you wherever you want, and you can capture video. But cinema is something that is different. And cinema is generally differentiated through technique, through craft, through artifice, through all of the tools that we are used to seeing when we tune into television and when we go to the cinema. But there is this the resurgence in the fact that everyone now has a camera on them and everyone can have access to relatively cheap video equipment. I think it is as important a time as any to talk about the actual craft of cinema and the ideation of cinema and how that is going to be the thing that differentiates your video content. So for example, some of you may have seen the latest IKEA advert on television or at the cinemas in which a group of sheets and rugs kind of dance around at a house party as if they were ghosts. And the house party gets broken up by the family coming back home. All these sheets hang themselves on the wall, on the floor, and it's revealed that actually they are the rugs and products from an IKEA catalogue. The final scene of the video may as well be a shot from inside an IKEA catalogue, but the director went to the effort of shooting an entire sequence in which IKEA's products have a rowdy house party that is broken up by a family. And if you think about what the difference of those two things is, it's the fact that the video is being produced to tell you how IKEA's products make you feel, or going one step further, how those products feel themselves by personifying or characterizing those products. So we really are getting at feeling in cinema. Cinema is intrinsically about feeling. Similarly, in the GE example, they are borrowing a lot of shots from spy and action thrillers. I think it really is influenced by Denis Villeneuve's film Sicario, if anyone has seen this, but it is shot like a bomb disposal sequence at the end there, and you have all these shrill strings. You have this incredibly closely shot magma and churning fire, and all of these things are really putting you on edge and increasing the tension. And you've got to think, is there really any need for explaining a new breakthrough material that GE has? Is there really any need to introduce tension and nail-biting shrill strings and all of the and the answer is yes, because people remember that video incredibly well, and it resonates with that video, and it says so much more than the innovations that the company were able to come up with and facets and aspects of the materials that brand are able to come up with. It says something about the brand itself, and it says something about the brand's character, and that is, as I mentioned earlier, redefining what is possible. So if we don't have a gigantic budget and we're not as savvy as Diego Contreras pushing the entire production schedule into going out to Arizona and shooting that in a foundry, how could this work on a smaller B2B scale? So I'm going to play a recent video that was done for a B2B payment service called Square, and have a short discussion afterwards.
I can't pretend to be a great celebrity, but still I'm quite important in my way. The job I have to do may not sound much to you, but all the same I'm very proud to say I'm the girl that makes the thing that drills the hole, that holds the ring, that drives the rod, that turns the knob, that works the thingamabob. I'm the girl that makes the thing that holds the oil, that oils the ring, that takes the shank, that moves the crank, that works.
Whatever the size of your business, now you can take card payments, Square and Fair. Search Square to find out more.
That works the thingamabob.
So this is actually a relatively straightforward video and wouldn't require a particularly high budget to execute, but it does still have a strong conceptual idea that is brought forward through the video execution, and that is essentially that Square gets close to and powers local businesses, and there are quite a few creative and conceptual choices that reinforce that. It is reflected in the fact a lot of close shots of people's faces and hands and machinery, so showing that we're really getting close and intimate to these businesses. The use of the Gracie Fields song, The Thingamabob, celebrated production line workers in Britain during World War II. So it's got this sense of populism and pulling together and a human touch and national pride. It kind of makes it feel kind of rustic and traditional, juxtaposed against this modern B2B payment system. So again, you don't necessarily have to use cutting edge futuristic imagery to reinforce the technological capabilities of your product. It can all be done through juxtaposition, for example, like in this video. And actually, the Square payment actual technology system, the little card and the reader, are shown exactly when it says thingamabob in the song. So it's kind of gives it this air of being, what is it? It's just a new technology that can't quite be understood. It just works. It's just a thing that just works. It's a thingamabob. It's a thing. So conceptual and low budget can go in hand when you are drawing these kind of links between the product benefits and cinematographic tools. And so, for example, we have recently worked on a video for a transportation technology client, a little bit like a kind of Oyster card equivalent that we have here in London. So a kind of contactless payment card. And interestingly, we started out thinking about character and a named character's journey as they travel from their bed in the morning and all their way to work as part of the morning commute. And interestingly, we were able to package this video a lot tighter and still retain the concept, but produce the video for probably a third of the budget, because when we actually outlined the full thing, funnily enough, it's rather expensive when you start using characters and locations and you're shooting these big wide landscape shots out in the world. Those things can add a lot of money to a production. However, what we decided to do was to reframe the video by focusing, very much like in this Square video, on hands, the moment that a payment is made, the moment that you get on the bus, the moment that you turn the key in the door, the moment that you step out onto the pavement. By suddenly shooting all of these shots, we weren't only suddenly getting closer to the character, but we were also able to shorten and tighten the production schedule. We were able to make some major efficiencies in the story, and we were also able, I believe, to make a sense of genuineness that would not be as present if you had actors with scripted dialogue. And I will get to that point shortly in my reasons why. But please do keep these, particularly this Square example and the GE example, in mind as we talk about some of the B2B pitfalls and how to avoid them, of course. So the first one, I've got three ones here, and these are probably my big take homes in terms of things to watch out for, and things that are often wrought and forged into the process of working on video in a corporate context. So the first one I call the explanation trap. So intrinsically, video is better at showing than telling. It can do both, but it is primarily a visual medium. There is a lot that can be expressed through camera movement and editing and staging and physical acting and lighting, but these things can be quite tricky to convey. And only when you are kind of really immersed in the medium and actually working in film do you know how to do it. Otherwise, it is just an element of trust. It's just having to go with the gut and knowing that's what you want to achieve. So really, the fact that cinema is visual can create a bit of an issue because it is not for everyone, and not everyone thinks in a visual way, and it can be really hard to translate an idea on paper and a product offering or a service offering in paper into something visual. So I'd say the probably most common pitfall in B2B video is not realizing the full capability of the creative elements of video, of not mustering the full creative potential of video. And I think instead, what often happens is that some companies can fall into the trap of using a video to explain their product or service rather than showing how it works. So in the Deloitte example, for example, we have 5 trends. And some new technologies that are going to be on the horizon. But we saw how a new technology could be shown conceptually in GE, not with all that flash, not necessarily with all that money, but if you were to say, oh, there are 5 trends, and one of them is based around agility, one's based around security, one's based around access, and taking each of those breakthroughs one step further into what they actually mean and what can be shown visually and what could be a theme, we then start to kind of have something that we can pull on cinematically. So what I often ask people to consider is, if you've got a video script, could it be shown equally as well as a PowerPoint, or equally as well as a website landing page? Because if so, it's probably not the right script right then and there, or it's probably not exactly the right concept for the video, sorry. Intrinsically, we all write things down as the way that we understand them, and we have to get all of the features of something down and included, but there's a lot that can be included off the page. So what this can often mean is that we have a lot of literal elements included in a video, long digressions. So characters can suddenly start explaining things, for example, that hamper the video's pacing. It might be that videos balloon into 3-4 seconds when they could have been kept at 90 seconds and had a much higher engagement rate, because we're concerned with including as much and explaining as much about the product as possible, and not trusting the viewer to continue the journey elsewhere, or to feel that information, or to simply not have that information, leave them hanging and have them go elsewhere in your brand ecosystem to find those messages. So I think it is, inference is much more powerful than being explicit when it works. Being able to infer in that Square payments video, for example, being able to infer that that product is what makes business go. It's what powers business. There is no moment in that video at which someone comes onto the screen as a presenter and says, our new Square product does X, Y, and Z. It delivers this benefit, that benefit, and for this cost, and we're all about powering UK business in this example. It doesn't spell any of that out. It trusts it through the use of music, through the use of imagery, for example. So that's what I mean when I talk about the explanation trap is basically the trap of saying rather than seeing, or putting into other sensory audio-visual formats. And it's also about not being afraid to implant an idea in the audience and let them continue the conversation in their own head. The second pitfall is using characters as mouthpieces. This is something that comes up quite regularly as well, and is worth seeing. So it's worth looking at any stage of a script and thinking, does this video need characters? So when I say a character, I mean a fictional individual who is a complete psychological whole. So someone who is believably a person with their own motivations and has an existence on the screen. That's what we really buy into when we're watching cinema, or when we're watching television. Sorry, it's a grand illusion. Basically, is that you are essentially summoning all of the aspects of cinema to say to someone that is a real person, right? But what happens oftentimes with brands, I find, and it really doesn't ring true, is that characters can be used as playing pieces, almost like chess pieces, that interact with a product or service. And when you can look at a video and say, these characters are only there to voice, say, an app's benefits or features, they literally only exist to be the couple that talk about an app that's really good for moving to their next house, for example. You don't buy into the fact that they have any relevance as people outside of that advert, and that they have any relevance to your own life other than a utilitarian one, other than a completely useful one. And to be honest, then that's the app that's actually being the main character. Those people are just being playing pieces. There are times when this can be absolutely fine, but it really does jar more often than not, I would say. It takes very good and coherent writing to make us believe a character. We've become incredibly attuned through all of our cinema watching. So it's hard enough for a single solitary writer to achieve characterization on their own. We have writers such as Stephen King writing really long treatises on how to, he locks himself away and puts so much time into character development and banging his head against the wall on his own for months and months and months and months. So our task is even harder, because we have multiple stakeholders. We're all going to be working and collaborating together, and we're all going to have ideas about who these people in the video can be. But the difficult thing then is, how do you create a coherent character when there may be 9 or 10 voices behind them? And it can be possible, but it is very, very tricky. So I would, in general, ask everyone to think about whether they really need characters or individuals in their films, and if they do, to potentially hand over a large portion of trust to a writer or to a reduced stakeholder group to try and ensure that that character has as much clarity and integrity as possible, because otherwise it's going to fall down for the viewer when they say it's an artificial human being. So often the benefit of a product, for example, can be expressed as a feeling, And so that might be why we want to have characters. We want to, we say we want to include characters when we want it to feel human, right? We want to add some humanity. So let's put some people in there. But interestingly, the benefit of a product, if it can be expressed as a feeling, it doesn't necessarily have to be felt by a character on screen. The viewer can be that character. We were working on a video recently, for example, in which we were showing the journey of someone from A to B, and you could show that character. We use the analogy, we use the analogy to sell into the client of, it's a little bit like filming someone going on a roller coaster and having an experience on that roller coaster from a sort of bird's eye view or from a third person view versus getting on that roller coaster with a GoPro strapped on your head. You can insert the viewer into the film as the main character if you focus on conveying emotion through your cinematography. Target your videos directly at the viewer if you are unsure of whether or how to use character. So in essence, it's a risky move, but it's fantastic when it works to use characters. Just treat it with the utmost of care and think about how you can include the viewer instead. My third point I want to come to is that there is sometimes a bit of a falling down point when form of a video does not equal the content of a video. This is a classic one for anyone who has had any kind of literary or artistic analysis, any background in reading art. But choosing the right medium for the message is essential. Form and content are not separable. It is very hard to take the content of a book and drop it into a film. That's why adaptation is such a hard art. It is the reason that you don't take PowerPoint and film it, although there is a certain irony to me saying that in this webinar. But in general, if you're creating a cinematic piece, you do not show written things on a screen without some form of narration or being helped through. You do not drop landing pages, for example, onto posters or display ads. This is what I mean when I say form should equal content. So sometimes we can have preconceived ideas of what it is that we want to make and how we approach a piece of messaging. But it's worth taking a second to stop and to ask ourselves, does the medium fit the message? And that should be the most important deciding factor. So if we're looking to sell a technology product's benefits and features, so for example, the Astro example that I showed at the front end as a product video is for decluttering email inboxes, and that uses animation. And the reason that that form fits that content so well is because it is about sales messages and product specifics. That company is going to want to say about what features you can click within your email client, how it's going to tidy up the inbox, how quickly it can do it, why they've developed it. But generally, it is going to be wanting to illustrate actions that that piece of software or that app can carry out. So you can imagine that as an animation video in which you are being taken through a series of animated scenarios. Now imagine a presenter on screen, a person right in front of the screen, and they are telling you all about the potential of this email client. But it's just them, they're just delivering it to the screen, and they're listing off these benefits. It can start to become a little cheesy potentially, it can start to become a little boring potentially because you haven't got that much visual interest. But because you have got a person and you have inserted sales messages and product specifics into their mouth, it is not really believable dialogue and you are instantly aware that you are watching a sales message. That may not be a problem in all contexts, but in general, you run the risk of it becoming heavily salesy and relatively on the nose. So if you take it even further, I was talking about avoiding characters. You can imagine placing two characters on a sofa and that one of them is talking to the other one about this incredible email clearing app that one of them has, and the other's like, oh my God, no way, like fantastic. And they're kind of bandying back the product's benefits to one another. That gets even cheesier and borderline disingenuous in a way, because that is not how people would really have that conversation in real life. So that's what I mean by making sure that the form is being fit in the right medium. Equally, if you want to convey that your service feels like well, a feeling feels like an emotion. So, for example, say that I am a chain of hotels and I want to convey the feeling of smoothness, of a smooth, relaxed journey. It would make sense for a video that is shot very cleanly and calmly, with long shots, with loose handheld movement, with languid music. You could not even have a voiceover. You could, or you could just have it as a very relaxed voiceover talent. So yeah, someone that you would expect from kind of fine dining or luxury products. But that would be the appropriate form for that content to start doing real world cinematography and all of this, and summoning all of these cinematic techniques that say smooth, efficient, soft, relaxed, etc. So it's just about matching what you've got to say with what tools of cinema that are available. So I think what this all boils down to is the fact that too many people think of B2B as a zone for very serious, strictly professional messaging. And I'm not just talking about sort of doing comedy here. I kind of mean in the straightforward approach to including sales messages and including rational and logical arguments as to why a product is superior. Yes, yes, rational and logical arguments exist, and there is a place for them, a very, very big place for them, and they can be included in video too, but it does not gel with what video does best intrinsically as a medium. What video does intrinsically best as a medium is it invests in emotion. It shows, not tells. It places you in a fictional environment so that temporarily you believe that you are there. So really, you are looking to connect by human emotion, by prioritizing quality environments and investing in video here, just to end out a quote with Henry Price. So I was just starting to allude to there the shifting role of video, so I just wanted to save that for now. So the role of video being about emotion means that we kind of have to divide up the responsibilities of marketing assets. We have to ask ourselves, if video is good at that, can any of my other assets pick up the slack? If we have a landing page, if we have a slide share, which show all of the product and service structures, benefits, features, flow graphs, diagrams, the expertise of the people behind it in terms of their CVs and written qualifications, do those things need to go into a video if we are putting them elsewhere? So I see this very much as dividing up of the duties and making sure that video doesn't become a jack of all trades, but it aces one thing that you have to say about your brand. The G video aces the fact of saying we do the impossible, or we redefine what's possible. The Square payment video aces the idea of saying that we connect small businesses and power those communities. But importantly, I can say what each one of those videos is about in a sentence. And if you are embarking on a new video project and you're embarking on a concept, I would strongly suggest that you try and reduce the proposition of your video to one sentence. And that just allows directors, writers, anyone on the creative end or in the agency side to really run with stuff. It might be varied in terms of what they run with, but we, for example, we would often, the creators will often present options and will obviously look towards feedback and have guardrails going into it. But in general, if it can be reduced to that one sentence, you're going to get so many more creative possibilities that relate to the emotional core of your brand, because it's about asking, why does my brand matter to people, and how can I translate a logical offering that I have? I've got the fastest supply chain analytics platform. How can I translate that into something that is going to strike an audience member in the gut and make them feel I've got to go with that? So while we are apportioning out the need and the responsibility to explain to other assets, it actually liberates video. It liberates video completely to go for emotion. So leave explanations to the web pages, leave all the granular details to the PowerPoint, leave the key messages and the brand terms for posters and social posts. Your video is an emotive expression of your video. Your video is an emotive expression of your product or service. So it's best to start by conducting creative exercises to work out what that offering is as an emotion. What does it feel like? What is your brand as a person? How would it defend itself in court? What are its favorite songs? How would it be soundtracked? What big issues are most relevant to it? It's all about making a connection that is to something deeper than the logical business sell. You can have that too, but it is just about making sure that it still strikes a deeper chord and answers the question, why does my business matter to people? And I think that that applies regardless of the obscurity or heavy rationality of the offering. So speaking of big issues, the final video that I will share was one recently produced by OVO Energy, and Power Your Life Differently is very much that single proposition statement that I've just been alluding to, and I'll just power this up now.
It's a lie. It doesn't exist. I do not believe in climate change. Global warming is not happening.
There is no such thing as climate change.
Severe weather warnings for the UK. Where is your evidence of global warming?
They are pulling out of the historic agreement.
I don't want you to protest, I don't want you to riot, as I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad. I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. Go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!
So it's a consumer example, but there's absolutely no reason why a single mission statement couldn't be made for anything to do with artificial intelligence, the fourth revolution, Internet of Things, finance risks, supply chain. Like I think the list goes on because there are such big technological changes and such big changes to the way that society is intrinsically being shaped by technology and some of its surrounding themes that I think every industry has their mission statement like this. So whether it's time to power your life differently, there is an equivalent for that, I think, in all fields. So with all the revolutions that are going on, why can't we just focus on this single statement? It's a big realization that will move people. So it's about finding the concept that will make people's jaw drop, no matter the industry. And so I'd just like to finish off by talking about the importance of trust in achieving a video like that. And I like to call this point the cinema of consensus, and that's the phrase I'd like you to leave with today. So it's really hard to sign off big budgets and understand exactly how your money's being spent. We understand that. And so that's why there is nothing more important than video treatments, scripts, and storyboards. These are the free tools that we can all sit around the table, we can all plan on, we can all agree on, and say, how are we going to get there? Because ultimately, that idea has to go out to a director and to a production crew, and they have to turn that page into something that actually exists. And that is a huge leap of faith. So if there's one thing that I want to leave you with, it's that trust is the most important thing in achieving B2C style videos. It is a gigantic leap. And that's why the more that you can get on paper, the more that you can dilute a positioning statement into one single sentence, that's how we are going to get there. So with this kind of collaborative approach, I think there's no reason that B2B can't make video content that completely shatters the lines between B2B and B2C. So let's all set out to make good cinema.
Brilliant, thanks Ash. Hopefully you're all suitably enthused and ready to go and create some excellent B2B cinematic experiences. I know I certainly am, and I don't even make film. So thanks for joining everyone today. If you do have any questions, please do feel free to pop them into the poll. I will also take this opportunity just to remind you about our next webinar session, which is about our release of our annual marketing research, which is What Works Where from 2018. So we'll be joined by Fran Brosen and Philip Black on the 20th of June, and you can register for that webinar on allmavono.com/www.webinar. Okay, thanks for joining everyone. We'll see you soon.
Yep, thank you very much, everybody. Have a good day.